Fleet Week in San Diego was an event that seemed to set the entire waterfront on fire, not with literal flames, but with the hum of activity, the buzz of thousands of voices, and the gleam of sunlight reflecting off steel-gray hulls. Navy ships lined the marina like silent guardians, their flags snapping sharply in the late morning breeze. Vendors sold hot pretzels ice cream and miniature American flags, while kids darted between the legs of adults, sticky fingers clutching plastic souvenir submarines. Sailors in crisp whites and Marines in pressed dress blues moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling for photos, and exchanging good-natured jokes. The air smelled of salt water mixed with fried food sunscreen, and a faint tang of jet fuel from the flyovers that had rattled windows all morning. It was the kind of day designed for celebration. Yet, in the middle of all the laughter and pageantry, one figure didn't seem to belong. Emily Carter stood near the edge of the boardwalk, half in the sun, half in the shadow of a mooring post. Her hood was pulled halfway over her head, the faded navy blue sweatshirt clearly old and well worn. Across the front, bold letters read, "Navy SEALs." The kind of print you could buy at any tourist shop, except this one was so faded it looked like it had seen years of wash cycles and harsh weather. But it wasn't the hoodie that drew attention. It was the tattoo, a black ink trident on her left forearm, etched with such detail it almost shimmered in the sunlight. It wasn't large or flashy, but something about the way it was positioned, the way the lines curved, spoke of more than just decoration. Emily didn't look like the sailors, milling around laughing in groups. She was still leaning lightly against the railing, her eyes fixed not on the ships or the crowd, but somewhere far out in the water, as if waiting for something no one else could see. A retired petty officer named Bill Grant spotted her first. He'd been a SEAL once years ago, before bad knees and a slower heartbeat had pushed him into civilian life. His gaze trained to notice the smallest irregularities zeroed in on her forearm. His brow furrowed. He'd seen plenty of fake SEAL tattoos in his time, but this one was different. He stepped closer, pretending to check out the waterfront. From 10 feet away, he could see the finer details. The trident's prongs anchor the pistol grip, all rendered with precision. Something about it gnawed at him. "You Navy?" he asked casually. Emily didn't look at him. She didn't even seem to register the question. Bill's eyes narrowed. He'd met quiet sailors before, but this was something else, a calculated stillness. Within minutes, his curiosity turned into suspicion. He approached one of the uniformed military police patrolling the marina, a young corporal who looked too eager for something to break up the monotony of crowd control. Bill pointed toward Emily, explaining his concern in low-clipped words. The MPs didn't waste time. 2 of them approached Emily from opposite angles, their boots clicking on the wooden planks of the pier. "Ma'am," the taller one said, his tone sharp but not aggressive. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" Emily finally moved, turning her head just enough to meet his eyes. There was no surprise in her expression, no confusion, just a calm acknowledgement, like she'd been expecting this. "We've had a report," the second MP began, "that you may be impersonating military personnel." A small crowd began to form, drawn in by the sight of uniforms and official voices. Emily said nothing. The taller MP gestured toward her forearm. "That tattoo, where'd you get it?" No answer. He repeated the question slower this time, as if she might have trouble understanding. Still, Emily's gaze drifted past to the line of ships, her expression unreadable. "You got ID?" the second MP asked. Without a word, Emily reached into the pocket of her hoodie and handed over a worn leather wallet. Inside was a California driver's license with the name Emily Carter, and a photo that matched her face. Exactly no military ID, no veteran's card. The MPs exchanged a look. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to come with us," the taller one said. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Someone muttered about stolen valor, another about disgrace. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeve, asking what was happening. A few people pulled out phones to record. Emily didn't argue. She didn't resist as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Her eyes flicked once more toward the water before she turned and allowed the MPs to guide her toward the waiting vehicle parked just beyond the pier. Bill Grant watched, arms crossed, feeling both justified and uneasy. Something about her composure didn't sit right with him. In his experience, imposters usually protested loudly, tripping over their own lies. This woman, though, she looked like someone who'd already measured the consequences and accepted them. The MPs opened the vehicle door, guiding her inside. From somewhere behind the crowd, a woman's voice called out, "She doesn't look scared." Bill glanced back toward the marina. The ship sat silent in the late afternoon sun, flags snapping, the water glinting like shards of glass. Somewhere far away, a jet roared overhead, momentarily drowning out the sound of the cuffs and the shuffle of boots. And in that brief moment, though, no one realized it, the wheels of a much bigger story had just been set in motion, one that would pull in people far above anyone's pay grade on that pier. The base office was small, windowless, and humming faintly with the sound of fluorescent lights. The air smelled of stale coffee and that faint metallic tang of old air conditioning units. A heavy table dominated the center, its surface scarred by years of elbows, pens, and coffee mugs. On one side sat Emily Carter, wrists cuffed in front of her, her hoodie rumpled from the long walk from the marina. On the other side sat Chief Petty Officer Miller, a man built like a filing cabinet, broad-shouldered with graying hair, cut to regulation length. Her wallet lay open on the table, its contents spread out like a tiny biography driver's license, a couple of grocery store reward cards, $48 in mixed bills, no military ID, no veterans paperwork. Miller leaned forward, resting thick forearms on the table. "Emily Carter, age 33, no record of military service. You want to tell me why you're wearing a SEAL hoodie and sporting a trident tattoo?" Emily didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the far corner of the room, as though she could see through the cinder block walls to somewhere far beyond. "This isn't a joke," Miller said, his tone sharpening. "Stolen valor is a federal offense. You've been reported. We can take this as far as it needs to go." Still nothing. Miller tapped a finger against the table. "That tattoo." He gestured toward her forearm. "Do you know what it means? It's not decoration. You have to earn it. And the people who earn it, they don't sit there like you are right now, pretending they don't hear me." Emily finally turned her eyes toward him, slow and deliberate. They were steady, unblinking, and somehow colder than the room's air conditioning. She didn't speak, but Miller felt the faintest prickling of unease along his neck. From the corner, an enlisted clerk named Torres stood with a camera, snapping photos of the tattoo from different angles. "We'll run it through the database," Torres muttered. "Probably some Pinterest knockoff." Miller smirked. "Yeah, we'll see how she explains that." The camera's shutter clicked twice more, and Torres stepped toward the door. "I'll email these to verification." As the door closed behind him, the hum of the lights felt louder. Miller leaned back, folding his arms. "You're not doing yourself any favors here. Silence isn't going to make this go away." Emily's lips twitched, just barely. It wasn't quite a smile. Miller frowned. "What's funny?" Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough that he had to lean forward to hear it. "You've already made the call," she said. "What call?" She didn't answer, eyes drifting back to that far corner of the room. Before Miller could press, the door swung open again, and Torres stepped back in. His usual relaxed posture was gone. His shoulders were rigid. "Chief," Torres said. Verification flagged it. Said it's unusual. Miller raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" Torres hesitated. "They're escalating it. Said to hold her here until someone comes down." "Who?" Miller asked. Torres didn't answer right away. "Sir, they didn't say just someone high up." Miller's frown deepened. Stolen valor cases didn't get high up attention. You called the MPs, wrote up the report, maybe got a JAG officer to weigh in, and that was it. This felt different. Emily leaned back slightly in her chair, the cuffs clinking. Her eyes finally settled on Miller, and this time she smiled, not mocking, but something closer to knowing. Miller pushed back from the table and stepped into the hallway with Torres. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on?" Torres shook his head. "I sent the photos like always. 30 seconds later, I get a call. Not an email. A call from someone at command. They said to keep her here and not to ask her any more questions until, and I quote, he arrives." "He," Miller repeated. Torres's voice dropped. "They didn't say a name, but chief the tone. I think they meant the Admiral." Miller stared at him. Admiral visits were for warships and ceremonies, not for quiet women in hoodies accused of faking a tattoo. Back in the room, Emily had shifted her attention to her hands, absently turning her wrists inside the cuffs, as if testing their weight. She wasn't restless exactly, more like she was waiting for something specific to happen. Miller re-entered and sat down again. "Looks like you've got friends in high places," he said, trying to sound casual. She didn't rise to the bait. "You care to explain why an admiral might be interested in your little stunt?" Her eyes flicked up, locking on his. "It's not a stunt." That was all she said, but the words carried an edge sharp enough to cut through the fluorescent hum. The minutes stretched into an hour. Torres came back twice, each time with nothing new to report, only that he's on his way. Miller spent most of it trying to piece together a theory, none of which made sense. The base's main corridor outside was growing louder. Footsteps, radio chatter, and the distant thrum of an approaching engine. Miller glanced toward the clock. Whoever was coming had made good time. Inside the room, Emily straightened subtly, her shoulders settling into a posture that wasn't civilian at all. It was the kind of readiness you saw in someone trained to move fast and without hesitation. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't Torres who stepped inside. It was a young lieutenant with sharp eyes who simply said, "He's here." Miller rose instinctively. "Who's he?" The lieutenant didn't answer, just stepped aside, holding the door open. The sound of boots on the tile floor grew louder, each step measured steady and unhurried. Emily's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze sharpened, as if a long-anticipated moment had finally arrived. And then the man himself stepped through the doorway, a tall, broad-shouldered figure, in immaculate dress, whites, a kind of presence that made the air in the room shift. Admiral Raymond Hawley was halfway through reviewing readiness reports in his Coronado office when his aide knocked once, crisp and urgent. "Sir, verification is on the line," the aide said. Hawley barely looked up. "Tell them to email the summary." "They say it's about a trident tattoo, sir." That caught his attention. Verification usually handled petty fraud cases, knockoff IDs, fake medals, the occasional fool wearing surplus gear to impress strangers. Tattoos, those never reached his desk. He took the phone. "This is Holly," he said. On the other end, a verification officer's voice was tight. "Sir, we've just received photographic evidence of a Trident design, but not the public variation. This one includes the—" He stopped himself, lowering his voice. "Sir, it has the Omega mark." Holly's pen froze above the paper. The Omega mark wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't in any database, not even the SEAL Heritage Archives. It was something only a handful of living people had ever seen. "Repeat that," Holly said. "Confirmed, sir. Ink placement matches the documented coordinates. Same curvature, same line depth. Whoever has this tattoo didn't get it from a photo." Holly's mind turned over the possibilities. That marking had been awarded only to members of Nightshade, a black unit so far off the books that even many admirals had no idea it existed. Officially, it had never operated. Unofficially, it had executed missions in places so deep behind enemy lines they could barely be acknowledged, even within the community. And when the unit was dissolved after a disastrous op, every trace of its existence had been buried, every trace, except that tattoo. "How old's the ink?" Holly asked. 5 to 7 years, judging from fade," the voice said. "Sir, the person in question is currently detained on suspicion of stolen valor at the San Diego base. MPs cuffed her at the marina." "Her?" Holly said sharply. "Yes, sir. Female civilian name, Emily Carter." That name landed in his mind like a ghost he hadn't seen in years. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling for half a heartbeat before making his decision. "Secure her," he said. "No questions, no processing, no photographs beyond what you've already taken. I'm coming there myself." "Yes, sir." "Should we—" Holly cut him off. "No one else talks to her until I arrive. No exceptions. And Lieutenant, if anyone tries to override that order, you call me directly. Understood?" "Understood, Admiral." The line went dead. Holly stood, buttoning his jacket. His aide looked at him with open curiosity. "Sir, get the car," Holly said simply. Within minutes, his convoy was gliding across the Coronado Bridge, the Admiral staring out at the expanse of San Diego Bay. Ships rocked gently at anchor sunlight, glinting off their hulls. To anyone else, it was a perfect postcard afternoon. But Holly's thoughts weren't on the water. He remembered Emily Carter, not in perfect detail, but in flashes Somalia, a chaotic night operation in Mogadishu's outskirts, gunfire snapping over rooftops, a team moving through narrow alleys with the precision of a ghost unit. And Emily, half her size, compared to some of the operators moving like she'd been born in those shadows. That mission had gone sideways. 2 men lost, extraction delayed by hours. By the time they'd reached the safe zone, the unit's future had already been decided by people in offices far away from the gunfire. Nightshade had been scattered to the wind identities, scrubbed files locked so tightly, even Holly had trouble accessing them. He'd been briefed never to contact any former members, unless absolutely necessary. Apparently today qualified. The convoy rolled through the base gates without slowing. Holly's arrival drew attention. Admirals didn't just show up unannounced, especially not at a small detachment office. Inside, Chief Miller stood by the door of the interrogation room, posture stiff. Torres hovered nearby, trying to look busy but clearly listening for whatever was about to happen. "She's inside?" Holly asked. "Yes, sir," Miller said. "We were just—" "Don't finish that sentence." Holly brushed past him. He stepped into the room, and for a moment, it was silent, except for the low hum of the overhead lights. Emily sat, exactly as described, cuffs in front of her hoodie loose on her frame, eyes cool and steady. The years had added a little weight to her features, but the alert stillness was the same. Holly closed the door behind him, letting it latch with a soft click. "Emily," he said. Her eyes lifted, locking on his. There was no surprise, only recognition. "Admiral," she said quietly. He took the seat across from her, setting his cap on the table. He didn't look at Miller or Torres, didn't acknowledge the others, watching from the narrow observation window. His gaze was on the ink on her forearm. He reached forward, taking her arm gently but firmly, rotating it so the trident was in the light. The omega mark was there, clear as day. The ink's edges softened, just enough by time to confirm its authenticity. "That tattoo's authentic," Holly said. The words seemed to change the air in the room. Miller, standing just behind him, shifted uncomfortably, like he just realized the gravity of his earlier interrogation. Emily's lips curved faintly. "You told me I'd never have to use it again." "Circumstances change," Holly replied. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the light felt louder, the air heavier. Then Holly turned his head slightly. "Unlock the cuffs." Miller hesitated for half a second too long. Holly's voice cut like a blade. "Now, Chief." The key rattled faintly as the cuffs came off. Emily rubbed her wrists once and folded her hands neatly on the table. Holly leaned forward, voice low enough that only she could hear. "We need to talk alone." Emily nodded, once the smallest of acknowledgments. As Holly stood, he glanced toward the window. "Clear the room." When the door closed behind the last MP, Holly exhaled slowly, as if bracing for something he already knew would be complicated. "What happened, Emily?" he asked. Her eyes stayed locked on his. "You already know the answer to that, Admiral. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The interrogation room smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant, the kind of scent that clung to police stations and never quite left. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the cold steel table where Emily sat, wrists chained to a ring bolted into the surface. Hours had passed since she'd been brought in, though she had long since stopped keeping track of the time. The young NCIS agent across from her, Lieutenant Rains, had asked the same questions a dozen different ways. "Who are you really? Who gave you the tattoo? Why were you on the base?" His tone was controlled, but Emily could sense the edge beneath it, a growing frustration at her silence. She hadn't given him much to work with: a name, Emily Carter, a birthplace, Norfolk, Virginia. And when he'd asked about the trident tattoo etched over her ribs, she'd simply said, "It's mine." Now the door opened without warning. Rains straightened in his chair, his eyes darting toward the figure who stepped inside. It was an older man, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp, every ribbon and medal perfectly aligned. His white hair was cropped short, his face weathered, but his movements carried the confidence of someone who had spent decades in command. His presence seemed to shrink the room, and Emily instinctively sat straighter. "Admiral Harris," Rains said, rising to his feet. "Sir, I didn't know you'd be—" "Sit down, Lieutenant," Harris interrupted. His voice was low, firm, and left no room for discussion. Rains obeyed, but the tightness in his jaw suggested he didn't like being sidelined. The Admiral stepped closer to Emily, his gaze sweeping over her with a kind of scrutiny that could unnerve even the most hardened sailor. "Emily Carter," he said, as if testing the weight of the name. "You know who I am?" She met his eyes without flinching. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the guard near the door. "Uncuff her." "Sir, I must protest," Rains began. "That's an order, Lieutenant." The guard moved forward reluctantly, the click of the cuffs releasing echoing in the room. Emily rubbed her wrists, but kept her eyes on Harris. The Admiral didn't take a seat. Instead, he circled the table, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes narrowing. Then he stopped, leaned slightly closer, and spoke in a tone meant for her ears alone. "That tattoo," he said. "It's authentic. I know, because I ordered it." Emily's breath caught. It had been years since she'd seen him, years since that night in the desert when she had thought she'd never make it home. But the voice was the same calm, unshakable, and threaded with a quiet authority that had once pulled her back from the edge. "You're the one who pulled me out," she said quietly. His eyes flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like recognition. "And you're the one who disappeared," he replied. Rains looked between them, baffled. "Sir, I don't understand." "You're not supposed to," Harris said sharply, then softer to Emily. "Why show up now? Why walk onto a secure base when you had to know it would land you here?" Emily hesitated. She could tell the truth, that she was out of time, that the mission no one had ever officially acknowledged was unraveling, and that the only person who might believe her was standing right in front of her. But saying it aloud would mean stepping back into a world she had fought hard to leave behind. "I need help," she said finally. "And it's about more than me." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "What kind of help?" Emily glanced at Rains and back at Harris. "The kind we can't discuss with him in the room." The silence stretched. Harris studied her like a man weighing not just the truth of her words, but the cost of believing them. Then he made his decision. "Lieutenant, you're dismissed." Rains opened his mouth to object, but thought better of it under the Admiral's glare. He gathered his papers, shot Emily a final suspicious look, and left the room. The moment the door closed, Harris pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Talk." Emily took a deep breath. 3 months ago, a submarine went missing off the coast of Yemen. Officially, it's still under investigation. Unofficially, the bodies haven't been found because they're not dead. Harris's eyes narrowed. "That's a bold claim." "It's not a claim," she said. "It's intel, and it's coming from someone who's been trying to clean it up before it hits the wrong hands. That someone is me." Harris leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Why bring it to me?" "Because you're the only one who won't dismiss me as a fraud." She paused, then added, "And because you know exactly what I used to be." He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small leather case, and set it on the table. Inside was a coin, heavy, gold-plated, stamped with a seal insignia and the Admiral's name. "You earned this," he said, "but you walked away, and now you're telling me the war we thought was over isn't finished." Emily's voice was steady. "It's worse. Someone's running black ops under our flag. And if they succeed, it won't just be our people who disappear." For the first time since entering the room, Harris's composure shifted. It wasn't fear exactly, but something sharper urgency. "All right," he said finally. "You'll get your meeting, but if you're lying—" "I'm not," Emily interrupted. He gave a short nod, stood and opened the door. "Follow me, and keep your head down. If you're right, there are people in this building who will want you dead before you leave it." Emily rose, her heart pounding. She'd come here for this moment, but she knew it was only the first step. Whatever came next would be far more dangerous than an interrogation room. As she followed Harris down the corridor, she caught sight of Rains, watching from a distance, his expression tight. He didn't trust her, and that made him a liability. The Admiral didn't speak until they reached a secure elevator. He swiped his clearance card, and the doors slid shut. Only then did he look at her again. Emily, he said quietly, whatever you've gotten yourself into, it's bigger than both of us, isn't it? She met his gaze and gave the only answer she could. Much bigger. The elevator began to descend, not up but deep underground. Rain pelted the glass windows of the small conference room, making the air inside thick with unease. Captain Lewis paced like a man wrestling with something he couldn't quite say. Across the table, Emily sat, with her hands folded, her posture calm, but her eyes sharp. She knew she had the room's attention. Admiral Holt sat at the head of the table, expression. Unreadable fingers tapping once against a folder marked classified. The silence stretched. Then Holt finally spoke. Emily, he began, you know why you're here. The records show you never served in the Navy, let alone as a SEAL. And yet you carry a tattoo that's awarded only after a mission that was not supposed to exist. Emily didn't flinch. I was never officially in the Navy, she said, voice steady. But the mission was real, and I was there. The Admiral leaned forward, his tone quiet, but forceful. If you're telling the truth, you're saying you were part of an unsanctioned op, one that the U.S. government denied ever happened. Do you understand the implications? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I understand exactly what it means. Captain Lewis cut in, frustrated. Then why not come forward sooner? Why hide? Emily turned her gaze on him. Because the last time I spoke about it, someone tried to kill me. The room went still. Rain hammered harder outside, like nature itself wanted to drown out the words. 2 years ago, Emily continued, I was living under a different name in coastal Maine. A man in a fishing cap followed me from the market to my home. He didn't ask questions. He pulled a suppressed pistol. If I hadn't recognized the weapon's shadow on the wall, I'd be dead. I barely made it to the dock before I disappeared into the water. Captain Lewis frowned, skeptical. That's convenient. Emily didn't bother answering. Instead, she pulled a small waterproof pouch from her jacket and slid it across the table. Inside was a fragment of an operations map, worn salt-stained and marked with coordinates in faded ink. Holt opened it, scanning quickly. His brows drew together. These coordinates, they matched the location of the Nightshade incident. Lewis blinked. The what? The Admiral didn't answer him. His eyes stayed locked on Emily. That mission was buried deeper than anything in my career. Even most admirals have never heard of it. How do you have this? I didn't just have it, Emily said. I survived it. A sharp crack of thunder made the room flinch, but Emily's voice carried over the noise. She recounted the mission in fragments, how a covert team had been deployed off the Alaskan coast, their objective to retrieve a stolen piece of experimental sonar tech from a rogue Russian vessel. The seas were brutal, the air cold enough to freeze breath mid-sentence. She described the chaos when an unmarked submarine emerged from the fog, tearing through the black water like a shark. The SEALs on that op, she said quietly. They never made it back. I only did because I wasn't supposed to be there. Lewis scoffed. You expect us to believe you just wandered into a top-secret mission? Emily's eyes hardened. Not wandered, planted. Someone inside wanted me there and wanted me alive afterward. The rest were expendable. The Admiral's jaw tightened. This was no longer a matter of idle curiosity. The Nightshade incident was a ghost in military history, a whisper among intelligence officers, that even mentioning it in the wrong room could end a career. Yet here was a woman with the mission's coordinates, the tattoo to prove involvement, and a story that matched the fragments Holt himself had pieced together over decades. Lewis shook his head. If this is true, why didn't the Navy come for you years ago? They did, Emily said flatly. But they weren't looking to welcome me back. They were looking to make sure I couldn't talk. Holt interjected, his voice now low and deliberate. And you think the people behind that are still in power? Emily didn't hesitate. I don't think I know. The Admiral closed the folder, fingers resting on the cover. Then we have a problem, he said. Because if you're right, the person who signed off on Nightshade is still wearing stars. A cold hush settled over the room. Holt stood, pushing back his chair. This conversation doesn't leave here. Not until I confirm what I think I already know. Emily leaned back, her expression unreadable. You'll need more than confirmation, she said. You'll need proof, and I'm the only one who can get it. Captain Lewis bristled. You're a civilian with no official clearance and a record of being arrested for impersonation. Why would we trust you? Emily smirked faintly. Because the people you're after don't know who you can trust anymore. But they still think I'm dead. Holt's eyes narrowed. And you intend to keep it that way? Exactly. The rain began to slow, but the tension in the room thickened like storm clouds refusing to leave. Holt tapped the table once, a silent decision forming in his mind. All right, he said finally. You'll have what you need. But you'll do this my way. We move quietly, no paper trail. And if this goes wrong, neither of us exists. Emily gave a small nod. That's the only way it ever works. As the meeting broke, Holt lingered behind, staring out the window into the wet darkness. He wasn't just questioning Emily's truth. He was questioning the very chain of command he'd sworn his life to protect. And for the first time in decades, Admiral Holt wasn't sure who the enemy really was. The secure briefing room was dim, its walls lined with soundproof panels that swallowed even the hum of the fluorescent lights. Emily sat at the long metal table, her wrists free now, but her mind shackled by questions. She was flanked by two stern-faced agents from NCIS, their body language broadcasting distrust. The air was heavy with the scent of stale coffee and damp wool from the agents' coats. Admiral Reeves stood at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on Emily. You know why we're here, he said finally. His voice wasn't accusing, more probing, like a diver testing dark waters. Emily's gaze didn't waver. No, sir. I was replacing sandbags during a flood relief operation, then dragged in cuffed and accused of impersonating a SEAL. That's not exactly a normal Tuesday. The younger agent snorted. That tattoo on your wrist, that's a classified unit mark from Nightshade SEAL operations that don't exist on paper. Civilians don't get that ink. Emily's pulse quickened. She instinctively tugged her sleeve down over the faded black and gray lines curling around her wrist. You're telling me something I don't know. I woke up with this tattoo after an accident in 2016. I was in a car wreck, head trauma. The doctor said memory loss was possible. Since then, I've had flashes, nightmares, training sequences, places I can't identify. The older agent leaned forward, his fingers drumming the table. And yet you know how to assemble and clear a Mark 13 sniper rifle in under a minute. We timed you at the shelter. That's not muscle memory an ordinary volunteer has. Reeves watched her carefully. Tell me about the accident. Emily hesitated. This was the first time anyone had asked without already assuming the worst. I was driving home from work, software developer Arlington. Black SUV clipped me from behind. I spun out on I-95, woke up in the hospital. They told me my wallet and phone were stolen at the scene. She paused, staring into her coffee cup. A week later, I started recognizing faces in crowds, people who seemed to recognize me too. But then they'd disappear. The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in calculation. Do you recall any names, call signs? Emily's mind flashed images, like fragments of a broken reel. A stormy night, a beach landing, someone shouting, "Raven on me!" The name hit her like a pulse of electricity. Her breath caught. Raven. Someone called me Raven. The younger agent scribbled the word. Reeves didn't move, but Emily saw his jaw tighten. He glanced toward the two-way mirror. "Step outside," he ordered the agents. When the door clicked shut, he leaned across the table, voice low. "You're telling me you have no official record of service, but the mark on your wrist is earned, not faked. The only way to get it is to complete Nightshade initiation. And the only way you complete that is if you survive the kind of operations they don't even brief the president on without clearance." Emily's throat went dry. "So what are you saying?" Reeves straightened. "I'm saying that if what you're telling me is true, someone erased you completely, service record, medals, mission logs, all gone. Which means either you were compromised or you're still in play and you don't even know it." The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. "Still in play, Admiral. I design apps and write code for a living." "Don't underestimate what muscle memory tells us," Reeves cut in. "We've seen this before, operators wiped clean, reinserted into civilian life, until they're needed." Emily's chest tightened. If that's true, who's pulling the strings? Reeves didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a folder and slid a photograph toward her. It showed a group of masked operatives in black wetsuits standing on a rain-slick deck. One figure, shorter than the rest, had a distinctive wrist tattoo peeking from beneath their glove, the same design as hers. Her fingers trembled as she touched the photo. "That's me." The Admiral's tone softened. "And this was taken in the Strait of Malacca, 2015, a hostage extraction that never made the news. The lead operative's call sign was Raven." Emily's head swam. The memories were no longer fragments. They surged forward, the roar of helicopter blades, salt spray in her eyes, the weight of a suppressed rifle, a voice in her earpiece. "Raven, clear the corridor." She pressed her palms to her temples. "I remember. But if I was Raven, why don't I have my life back?" Reeves exhaled. "Because someone wanted Raven dead on paper, at least, which means whoever erased you might try to finish the job." The words landed heavy. "So what now?" The Admiral's eyes locked on hers. "Now, Emily, we find out who did this, and we find out why you've suddenly been placed back in their path." The door opened without a knock. The older NCIS agent stepped in, face pale. "Sir, we have a situation. The shelter where we picked her up, it's been hit, windows, blown out, files missing. And we found this." He placed a small black coin on the table. On one side, the engraving of a nightshade flower. On the other, the number 13. Reeves's expression darkened. "They know she's awake." Emily stared at the coin, a chill crawling up her spine. She didn't fully understand what was coming, but instinct told her one thing. The flood, the arrest, none of it had been random. The game had started long before she knew she was a player. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Lexi sat at the defense table, her posture straight, jaw set, as the murmur of voices in the gallery swelled. The media had swarmed the trial from day one, but today was different. Today her lawyer would unveil what they'd been holding back, the true identity of the man who had ordered the mission in Yemen, the one the Navy now swore never happened. Her attorney, Michael Crane, leaned over. "When I call the next witness, do not react. Let me handle it." She nodded once, but her heart thudded so hard it felt audible. Across the room, The Navy's lead prosecutor adjusted his tie, already wearing the smug look of someone certain of victory. To him, Lexi was a fraud, a con artist who had stolen valor and deceived the public. To Lexi, he was a bureaucrat paid to erase people like her. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." Judge Karen Whitmore entered, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. She'd been hard to read throughout the trial, but Lexi had noticed one thing: Whitmore respected courage, even if she didn't show it. The judge took her seat and the proceedings began. Michael rose slowly. "Your Honor, the defense calls Admiral Jonathan Beckett to the stand." The gallery erupted into whispers. Admiral Beckett was a living legend in the Navy, decorated untouchable and known for never setting foot in a courtroom unless he was subpoenaed. Today, he walked with calm authority, his uniform crisp rows of ribbons and medals glittering under the overhead lights. Lexi's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen him in 8 years. Beckett was sworn in, his voice firm. Michael stepped closer. "Admiral, do you recognize the defendant?" Beckett's eyes met Lexi's for a long, deliberate moment before he turned back. "Yes, I do." Michael paced slowly. "Please tell the court under what circumstances you first met her." The prosecutor objected immediately. "Relevance." But Judge Whitmore waved it down. Beckett leaned forward. 8 years ago, during a covert operation in Yemen, she was assigned under my direct authority." A ripple of shock moved through the room. The Navy's case had hinged on one point: that Lexi had never served in any capacity. Beckett's words hit that foundation like a sledgehammer. Michael nodded. And what was her role? She was embedded in the Nightshade Unit, an experimental joint task force designed for rapid extraction in hostile zones. "She saved my life in Marib province. If not for her, I wouldn't be here." Gasps spread. The prosecutor scrambled to his feet. "Your Honor, the witness is making unverified claims about classified missions." Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Admiral, are you saying this mission existed?" Beckett's jaw tightened. "I'm saying the mission existed, and so did she. The Pentagon may have erased the paperwork, but the people who were there remember." Lexi's chest felt heavy, but not from fear. This was vindication beginning to bloom. Still, she kept her face unreadable. The prosecutor changed tactics, pulling up a large display screen. "Admiral, are you aware that the tattoo on the defendant's shoulder, this so-called Nightshade insignia, matches one used by a disbanded unit of Navy SEAL Team 10, a unit she never belonged to?" Beckett didn't even glance at the screen. "That tattoo is authentic. You didn't get it in a shop. You earned it in blood." The room went silent. Whitmore let the words hang before gesturing for the prosecutor to sit. Michael approached the witness box again. "Admiral, why are you testifying now after 8 years of silence?" Beckett looked directly at Lexi. "Because I was ordered to bury what happened. But watching her stand here, accused of being a liar, while the truth sits locked in a safe, it's wrong, and I won't be complicit anymore." Lexi wanted to say something to thank him, but she knew better. This was only the beginning. The prosecution attempted to undermine Beckett's credibility, citing memory gaps and the absence of official records, but the damage was done. For the first time in the trial, the jury leaned forward with genuine curiosity instead of skepticism. Beckett's testimony had cracked open the Navy's wall of denial. When court adjourned, the hallway outside was chaos: reporters shoving microphones, cameras, flashing voices, overlapping. Lexi and Michael pushed through, but Beckett caught up to her before she reached the elevator. "They're not done," he said quietly. Testifying makes me a target now, but I'd do it again." She studied him, searching for the man she remembered, the one who'd led her unit into the dark, not knowing if they'd return. He still had that steel in his eyes. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. "Be ready. This isn't over." As she stepped into the elevator, she caught a glimpse of the prosecutor across the hall, speaking urgently into his phone. She didn't need to hear the words to know what they meant. They'd be coming after both her and Beckett now. Inside, her reflection in the polished metal doors looked like someone else entirely, not the accused, not the soldier, but something in between. And she knew this part of the story wouldn't just be about clearing her name. It would be about exposing the truth. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, cameras lining the back wall, journalists buzzing with anticipation. Emily sat with her defense team, steeling herself. Today was more than a trial. It was a reckoning. After weeks of silence, a new witness was about to testify, one with the power to shatter the Navy's carefully crafted narrative. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. "All rise." Admiral Jonathan Beckett stepped to the stand again, his presence commanding the room's full attention. He cleared his throat, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the truth is seldom neat. The mission known as Nightshade was classified beyond almost anyone's clearance. It was conceived as a covert operation to retrieve stolen technology from hostile waters, technology that, if left in enemy hands, could threaten national security." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I was the commanding officer in charge. Emily Carter, known to us as Raven, was the team's point sniper and a skilled operator. Despite what official records say, the prosecution shifted uncomfortably. After the mission went sideways, the government chose to erase it from public record, not because it never happened, but to protect the identities and lives of those involved." Emily's eyes remained fixed on Beckett. He was speaking for her, for the truth that had been buried so deeply. The prosecutor attempted to discredit Beckett, questioning his motives and the lack of documentation, but the jury had already sensed the cracks in the official story. Next, a classified video was shown, grainy footage from a drone feed showing the Nightshade team in action, their movements precise and deadly. One frame lingered on a figure with a trident tattoo, unmistakably Emily. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Emily's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we submit this is proof of Miss Carter's service and the wrongful accusations against her." Judge Whitmore nodded gravely. "The evidence will be accepted." The trial culminated in a stunning confession from a high-ranking Navy official who admitted to authorizing the cover-up and ordering the erasure of records to protect the program's secrecy. The official claimed it was done to safeguard national interests, but acknowledged the cost to those like Emily. The jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous: not guilty. The courtroom erupted in whispers and relieved smiles. Outside, reporters swarmed Emily, but she held up a hand. "This isn't just my victory," she said. "It's for every silent soldier who served in the shadows and was forgotten. We deserve to be seen." Admiral Beckett stood beside her, proud but solemn. "The fight for truth is never easy, but it's worth it." As Emily stepped into the sunlight, the tattoo on her wrist felt less like a secret and more like a badge of honor, a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and finally recognition. The journey had been long and fraught, but at last the truth was free. In the gripping tale of Emily Carter, a woman arrested for allegedly impersonating a Navy SEAL, only to have her authentic trident tattoo validated by an admiral who knew her hidden past, we uncover a profound life lesson. The truth often lies buried beneath layers of misunderstanding and judgment, waiting for the right moment to emerge and redefine everything. Emily's story is a poignant reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Her faded hoodie and silent demeanor masked a warrior who had braved covert operations in the shadows, sacrificing her identity for missions that could never be acknowledged. In real life, how many of us have felt like Emily, misjudged, isolated, carrying invisible scars from battles fought in silence? Whether it's a veteran hiding PTSD, a single parent enduring quiet hardships, or anyone whose struggles go unseen. This narrative tugs at the heartstrings, evoking empathy for those who serve without fanfare, their valor etched not just in ink, but in the quiet resilience of their souls. It teaches us to pause before casting stones, to seek understanding over suspicion, and to honor the untold stories that shape who we are. Emily's journey from cuffs to vindication stirs a deep emotional resonance, urging us to reflect on our own lives. What hidden truths do we carry? How can we support those whose sacrifices remain in the dark? It's a call to embrace compassion, to recognize that true strength often whispers rather than shouts. If this emotional lesson moved you as much as it did me, drop a comment below sharing a personal story of overcoming judgment or a time when truth prevailed in your life. Let's build a community of inspiration. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. More heart-stirring stories like this are coming your way. Your support means the world.